The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is speaking. Let's listen in.
A big difference on the battlefield. But as I said, the flip side of this is all the work that we are doing here to help Ukraine prepare for having the strongest possible economy, the strongest possible democracy, which is actually necessary to achieve a thriving economy and for reconstruction. If Ukraine is going to attract the investment it's going to need, not just from governments, not just from international financial institutions, but from the private sector, it has to build the best possible environment to attract that investment. So we'll be talking about all of that over the next 2 days. We also had an opportunity to talk about preparations for the NATO summit that's upcoming in Vilnius, and the practical steps that we will continue to take to shore up our own security and revitalize the alliance to make sure it's prepared to meet all of the challenges of this century. As James mentioned, and as all of you know, I came to London from Beijing, and so we had an opportunity to discuss the trip that I just took. President Biden sent me to Beijing because he believes strongly that both the United States and China have an obligation to manage our relationship responsibly. And that starts with strengthening lines of communication across our governments, exploring and making clear our positions and intentions in the places where we have very significant differences, and also looking at where we might cooperate together when it's in our mutual interest, and often as well in the interest of many other countries around the world. We had very candid, substantive, and constructive conversations on each of these fronts, and I think it's clear that both sides agreed on the need to try to stabilize the relationship. And we identified specific areas where dialogue and cooperation might benefit both of us and also other countries around the world. Having said that, the hard work now, the hard diplomatic work, is going to be entrained to actually carry this forward. None of the work we're doing is done in a day or even in 2 days, even with as much time as we spent together. It's a process, and we'll be engaged in that going forward. But here again, we are in full alignment with our friends and partners. If you look at what Prime Minister Sunak spoke about in Hiroshima when all of the leaders were together at G7, and particularly when you look at what James spoke about at Mansion House, you can see that there is very clear alignment, and not just between us, between virtually all of Europe and many countries in Asia as well, and beyond. And I think that alignment in the approach that we're taking to the challenges posed by China is one of the most important assets that we have going forward. Let me just finally say that, as James mentioned, this visit also comes on the heels of Prime Minister Sunak's visit to Washington, where he and President Biden announced a new plan for adapting and reimagining our economies and our economic partnership for the 21st century. The Atlantic Declaration is broad and it's deep, as is our partnership. And among other efforts, it will expand our work together on artificial intelligence, something we talked about over lunch, both at the Prime Minister's first Global Summit on AI safety and elsewhere. We're focused together on establishing guardrails that maximize innovation to use AI for good while minimizing the risks that it represents. And we'll work not just with each other, but other governments, with the private sector, with civil society, to ensure that AI capabilities are used safely, that they strengthen human rights and democratic values rather than repress them, and that they advance equity, not bias. We're also, of course, launching negotiations on a critical minerals agreement, and that will count 5 critical minerals extracted or processed in the UK toward the tax credits that exist now under the landmark Inflation Reduction Act. That, in turn, is going to create good paying jobs on both sides of the Atlantic, in both of our countries, while also meeting the high labor and environmental standards that we share. And it will help us meet the targets that we've set to prevent catastrophic warming of our planet. The agreement will make our critical supply chains more resilient, less dependent on unreliable governments. So, across all of these efforts, including the one that brought me here today, ensuring a secure independent, democratic, and prosperous Ukraine. As always, we simply could not ask for a better partner than the United Kingdom. We're grateful for that, and James, thank you for lunch.
Thank you very much. Sam, you're going to be the ringmaster.
Thank you both for that. We've got time for a few questions, and we will start with James Landale from the BBC.
Mr. Secretary, Foreign Secretary, good afternoon. James Landale, BBC. Mr. Secretary, first of all, can you explain to us why the United States is currently unwilling to give Ukraine ATACMS long-range missiles? And why is the United States pushing for Jens Stoltenberg to stay on as NATO Secretary General? And Foreign Secretary, is the UK willing to give state-backed insurance cover to British firms so that they can help rebuild Ukraine while the fighting carries on? And can you explain why you're blocking the release of funds from the sale of Chelsea Football Club, more than £2 billion, that are designed to go to help those victims of the war in Ukraine? Thank you.
Happy to start. On weapons for Ukraine, at every step along the way of this aggression by Russia against Ukraine, we've worked to get the Ukrainians what they need to defend themselves, and now as well to take back the territory that's been seized from them. And in fact, that started even before the aggression, as we saw the storm clouds mounting the previous year. We did drawdowns for the kind of equipment that they needed, Stingers, Javelins, and that they had in hand